Hi everybody, Pastor Michael Linderman, July 29th, 2020. It is Wednesday, and we are doing the Psalms on Wednesdays. This is our second week in this series of Psalms on Wednesdays. And so I'm at 145, Psalm number 145, verses 8 and 9, 14 through 21. These are the verses that are going to be used as the Psalm verses for worship this coming Sunday on August 2nd. And I liked the Psalm so much and these selected verses that I thought we would read through it now. Remember that the Psalms are teaching us how to be children of God. What is it like to be a child of God? This is what it feels like when you read the Psalms and read what they describe. What does it mean to be in relationship to God, the God of Israel, but also the God of all creatures, all creation? This is what it feels like, and that's why we read the Psalms. This is what it's like to be in relationship with this God, the God. The Lord is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. The Lord is good to all, and his compassion is over all that he has made. The Lord upholds all who are falling and raises up those who are bowed down. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food in due season. You open your hand, satisfying the desire of every living thing. The Lord is just in all his ways and kind in all his doings. The Lord is near to all who call on him in truth. He fulfills the desire of all who fear him. He also hears their cry and saves them. The Lord watches over all who love him, but all the wicked he will destroy. My mouth will speak the praise of the Lord, and all flesh will bless his holy name forever and ever. The psalm starts out with the graciousness and mercy of God, and these wonderful, this power-packed sentence, verse 8 of this psalm. The Lord is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. If you want to understand who God is, read that verse and hold it in front of your eyes and in your mind and in your heart your whole life long, and you will come to understand who God is. God is gracious, God is merciful, God is slow to anger, patient, and abounding in steadfast love. The love that God has for us and for all creation never ends. It's eternal. And it is steadfast. It's trustworthy. It doesn't move. It isn't shaken by the whims or the fickle attitudes of, say, human beings. It is rather God's steadfast love, and it never changes. A wonderful promise that God has that compassion also for all that exists. So again, another indication that God, the God that we're talking about, is the God who creates everything so that God can love it with this steadfast, boundless love. The Lord upholds all who are falling and raises up those who are bowed down. God has a special regard for those who are suffering or are vulnerable. And that's a wonderful promise to those who do suffer, and especially when we go through times of challenge in our lives, when we suffer, when we're hurt, when we are ill or facing some peril. This is the promise for us. It's also an indication of God's privilege for those who are vulnerable in the context of being among those who are not. And so this points to God's justice, right? God, in God's justice, will privilege the more vulnerable over those less vulnerable. And that's not to hurt those who are less vulnerable, because as the psalm has already stated, we've all received God's grace, mercy, and his abounding and steadfast love. All compassion from God is for all that God has made. So everybody's getting that. Everybody's getting that grace and that compassion. But in the context of those who are suffering, those who are vulnerable, God is making a special privileged view, taking a special privileged view of those people in those situations. And that is something important for those of us who do enjoy privilege in our lives to keep that in mind. That's where God's justice indicates our direction and our regard for other people. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food in due season. You open your hands, satisfying the desire of every living thing. That's a confession by the psalmist, addressing God. You are doing these things. Martin Luther, the theologian who is responsible for the beginning, for the Lutheran Christian tradition, said that people can use these verses, these two verses, as table prayer in your family life. The Lord is just in all his ways and kind in all his doings. He is near to those who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. And that idea that God is so near to us, so close to us all the time, but to those who call on him in truth, he has a special open ear to your pleas. And so what does it mean to call on God in truth? Well, the truth is when we acknowledge God as God and acknowledge ourselves as mere creatures. And so that means humility before God and repentance, because we are flawed in our moral and ethical living and doing, and we're not perfect. God is perfect, we are not. So therefore, to approach God in truth means to approach God with humility and repentance. Do that, and God will be near to you when you call. He fulfills the desire of all who fear him. He hears their cry and saves them. This fear mentioned here is not the fear of death, but awe. To have awe for God, respect. To treat, when I go to the beach with my family, I always teach my kids, you have to respect the ocean. This is a very powerful thing. It's really nice when the ocean's calm and the day is beautiful and the temperature's good and there's no, and the ocean water's clean. It's a beautiful thing to be in the ocean. But you have to respect the ocean too at the same time, because it can change in different conditions. It can be very dangerous. And so that you treat the ocean with awe and reverence and respect. And that's a similar way to interpret this use of the word fear in the psalm with regard to God. Respect God. God is God. You are just a creature. You are here today and gone tomorrow. God isn't. God is always. The Lord watches over all who love him, but all the wicked he will destroy. This is a strong statement that the wicked are destroyed. For much of our lives, we may from time to time think, well, that's in due course. The wicked should be destroyed, right? But I always question this. Does the psalmist mean that God will destroy the wicked for now? In other words, they'll die and make room for the next generation. Their ways will die with them. Their crimes will die with them. Their atrocities will the effects of their atrocities and their actions remain. And the suffering that they've induced or caused does remain and can be even amplified in the future by other people. But does God destroy them forever or just until the end? Listen to what the final verse of the psalm says. My mouth will speak the praise of the Lord, and all flesh will bless his holy name forever and ever. Now, if that's true, that all flesh will bless his holy name forever and ever, then that might suggest that even those he has destroyed, quote unquote, will in the end still be around to, in some way, in the end, acknowledge God as good, merciful, just, and loving, even those who he has judged and destroyed. Wonderful things to think about and pray about. We don't have the answers, but we have these promises, and so we hold on to them. May this psalm and its teaching be a blessing to you today. Thanks.